The word cut through the music like a knife through silence. Kurt Cobain's fingers stopped moving on his guitar mid-chord, and for a moment, the entire Commodore Ballroom in Vancouver held its breath. It was March 1991, and Nirvana was still months away from releasing Nevermind, still playing mid-sized venues to crowds that were passionate but not yet massive. Tonight's crowd was around 900 people, packed tight against the stage in the historic ballroom that smelled of sweat, beer, and cigarette smoke. Kurt had been in the middle of Negative Creep, his body coiled with the tension that made his performances feel like watching a spring about to snap. His blonde hair hung in his face, his oversized cardigan already soaked through with sweat, despite them being only 5 songs into the set. The crowd was moshing hard, bodies slamming into each other with the kind of controlled chaos that Kurt usually loved to see. But then the word came from somewhere in the middle of the pit, loud enough to be heard over the amplifiers. A slur. Anti-gay. Vicious. Kurt's hand dropped from his guitar, letting it hang from the strap around his neck. The feedback screamed through the speakers as he stepped away from the microphone. Krist Novoselic, on bass, looked over at him confused, still playing the bass line. Dave Grohl's drums faltered, then stopped. The entire venue went quiet in stages, like a wave moving backwards from the stage. First, the people up front stopped moving, then the ones in the middle, then, finally, even the ones at the bar in the back noticed something was wrong. Kurt walked to the front of the stage and stared into the crowd. His face wasn't angry, exactly. It was something else. Disappointed, maybe. Hurt. Like someone had just told him that everything he'd been trying to say with his music had been completely misunderstood. He stood there for what felt like forever, but was probably only 15 seconds, just looking. 900 people stared back at him, confused, wondering what was happening. Then Kurt spoke into the microphone, his voice quiet but clear. "Who said that?" No one answered. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Someone in the back yelled something supportive, but Kurt held up his hand. "No, seriously, who said that word? Because I want to talk to you." Still nothing. Kurt sat down on the edge of the stage, his legs dangling over the side. This wasn't something rock stars did in 1991. You didn't stop your show. You didn't sit down mid-set like you were about to have a conversation with friends on a porch. "I'll wait," Kurt said. "We've got all night. This show doesn't continue until whoever said that identifies themselves." The silence in the Commodore Ballroom was absolute now. You could hear the ventilation system humming. Someone's beer bottle clinked against the floor. A nervous cough from somewhere in the darkness. Krist and Dave stood on stage behind Kurt, frozen, not knowing what to do. This wasn't in any playbook they knew. Then, from the middle of the crowd, a voice. Male, slurred with alcohol, defensive. "What's your problem, man? It's just a word." The crowd parted slightly, creating a narrow corridor that led to a guy in his mid-20s, wearing a flannel shirt and a baseball cap. He was swaying slightly, clearly drunk, and his friends were trying to pull him back, but he shook them off. Kurt looked at him for a long moment. "Come up here." The guy laughed, like this was all a joke. "You want me on stage?" "Yeah," Kurt said. "Come up here. Let's talk." Security guards started moving toward the guy, but Kurt stopped them with a gesture. "No, let him come up. He clearly has something to say." The guy, probably figuring this was some kind of invitation to glory, pushed through the crowd and climbed up onto the stage. He stood there, grinning like he'd just won something, looking out at the crowd like he was the star now. Kurt stood up and walked over to him. They were about the same height, but Kurt was so thin, he looked fragile next to this stocky drunk guy. "What's your name?" Kurt asked. "Travis," the guy said, still grinning. "Okay, Travis, you used a word a minute ago. A slur. You want to explain why?" Travis shrugged. "It's just a word, man. Don't be so sensitive." Kurt nodded slowly, like he was considering this. Then he turned to address the entire crowd. "Travis here thinks I'm being too sensitive. Let me tell you why I'm not." Kurt's voice wasn't angry. It was calm, almost conversational. But there was something in it that made everyone in that ballroom lean in to listen. "I grew up in Aberdeen, Washington, small logging town, the kind of place where being different meant you got your ass kicked. I got called every name you can imagine because I didn't fit in, because I had long hair, because I liked art, because I didn't want to hunt or play football or do any of the things boys were supposed to do. Travis's grin was starting to fade. Kurt continued, "When I was in high school, I had a friend named Kevin. Kevin was gay. He didn't tell many people because in Aberdeen in the 1980s, that was dangerous information. But he told me because I was his friend, and he knew I wouldn't judge him. You know what happened to Kevin?" The ballroom was so quiet now, you could hear individual people breathing. Kevin got beaten up so badly by a group of guys from our school that he ended up in the hospital. Broken jaw, broken ribs. They used the same word you just used, Travis, while they were kicking him. Kurt's voice cracked slightly, but he kept going. Kevin moved away after that, left Aberdeen. Last I heard, he was in San Francisco trying to build a life where people wouldn't hurt him for being who he is. He was one of the kindest people I ever knew. He used to lend me records, taught me guitar chords, and he got beaten nearly to death because of who he loved. Travis wasn't grinning anymore. He was looking at his shoes. The crowd was absolutely transfixed. So when you use that word, Travis, you're not just saying a word. You're aligning yourself with the people who put my friend in the hospital. You're telling every gay person in this room that you think they're less than human. You're telling me that you don't understand a single thing about what this band stands for. Kurt gestured around the ballroom. This scene we're building, this music, it's supposed to be for everyone. Everyone who's been told they don't belong. Everyone who's been hurt for being different. Everyone who's been kicked around by people like the ones who hurt Kevin. He looked directly at Travis. We don't want people like you here. This music isn't for bullies. It's not for people who use slurs. It's for the people those slurs are meant to hurt. Travis mumbled something that might have been an apology, but Kurt wasn't done. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave. Not because I'm kicking you out, but because after what I just told you, if you have any decency at all, you'll understand that you don't belong here tonight. For a moment, it looked like Travis might argue, but something in Kurt's eyes, something in the way the entire crowd was now staring at him with a mixture of anger and disgust, made him deflate. He mumbled something else and climbed down off the stage. The crowd parted to let him through, but it wasn't a friendly parting. It was the kind of parting you make for something you don't want to touch. Travis and his friends made their way to the exit, and when the door closed behind them, the entire ballroom erupted in applause. But Kurt held up his hand again. Wait, before we continue, I want to make something really clear. If any of you came here tonight thinking this band supports homophobia, racism, sexism, or any other kind of hate, you should leave now. Seriously. Get your money back at the door, because we don't want you here. He paused, looking across the faces in the crowd. This music, our music, it belongs to everyone who's ever felt like they didn't fit in. Gay, straight, bi, whatever. Different races, different backgrounds. If you've ever been made to feel small by someone else, this music is yours. But if you're the kind of person who makes others feel small, this music is not for you. The applause this time was deafening. Kurt waited for it to die down, then picked up his guitar. Okay, now let's play some songs. What happened next was one of the most intense performances Nirvana would ever give. Every song felt charged with extra meaning, extra energy. Kurt sang like he was trying to prove something, like he was channeling all his anger at bullies and all his love for outcasts into every note. The crowd responded in kind. The moshing resumed. But it was different now. People were helping each other up when they fell, creating space when someone needed air. It felt like what Kurt had just done had transformed the show from a concert into something more like a gathering of people who understood each other. Between songs, Kurt kept talking. Not long speeches, just little comments that reinforced what he'd said. This next song is for everyone who's ever been told they're not good enough. This one's for anyone who's ever had to hide who they really are. Each comment drew cheers, and with each cheer, you could feel the room becoming more unified, more purposeful. When they played Polly, Kurt's song about sexual violence, told from the perspective of the victim, the entire crowd went silent and still, listening to every word. When it ended, no one cheered. They just stood there, processing what they'd heard. After the show, word spread fast. In the pre-internet era of 1991, this kind of story traveled through phone calls and fanzines, through people who'd been there telling people who hadn't. Within days, the story of what Kurt Cobain had done in Vancouver was being told in punk houses and college radio stations across North America. Some people loved it. Some people, predictably, accused Kurt of being too politically correct, of killing the fun of rock and roll with his politics. Kurt didn't care about those people. In an interview a few weeks later, a journalist asked him about the incident. "Do you worry about alienating fans by taking such strong political stances?" Kurt's answer was immediate. "If I alienate bigots, I'm fine with that. Actually, I prefer it. I want bigots to hate our band. That means we're doing something right." The interviewer pressed him. "But don't you want your music to reach as many people as possible?" Kurt shook his head. "Not if those people are pieces of shit. I'd rather play to 100 people who get it than 10,000 people who don't." That attitude would define Nirvana's career. Even as they became one of the biggest bands in the world after Nevermind exploded later that year, Kurt never stopped calling out injustice when he saw it. He wore dresses on magazine covers to challenge gender norms. He spoke out repeatedly about gay rights at a time when that was still controversial in rock music. He banned certain photographers from shows because they'd been sexually inappropriate with female fans. In the liner notes to Incesticide, Kurt wrote, "If any of you in any way hate homosexuals, people of different color, or women, please do this one favor for us. Leave us the fuck alone. Don't come to our shows and don't buy our records." That statement was directly connected to what happened in Vancouver. The incident had crystallized something for Kurt, had made him realize that his platform could be used for more than just entertainment. The people who were at the Commodore Ballroom that night never forgot what they witnessed. Years later, many of them would talk about it as a formative moment in their own lives, the night they saw someone with power use it to protect the powerless. For Kurt personally, the Vancouver incident reinforced his belief that music scenes should be safe spaces for marginalized people. He became even more intentional about making Nirvana shows welcoming to women, LGBTQ+ people, and anyone else who might feel threatened in typical rock venue environments. He worked with security to prevent sexual assault in crowds. He called out violent moshing when he saw it. He tried, in his imperfect way, to make sure that the community building around his music was different from the toxic masculinity that dominated so much of rock and roll. The story of what happened in Vancouver in March 1991 is important because it shows who Kurt Cobain was before the fame became overwhelming, before the pressure became too much. It shows the principles that guided him, the things he cared about deeply enough to stop a show and risk alienating his audience. Travis, the guy who got called out on stage, reportedly told people years later that the experience had changed him, that the public humiliation had forced him to confront his own prejudices in a way nothing else had. Whether that's true or just a convenient story, who knows? But what is true is that everyone else in that room that night learned something about standing up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. Today, the idea of a rock star stopping a show to confront a bigot in the crowd seems almost quaint, like something from a simpler time. But in 1991, it was radical. Rock and roll was still largely a boys' club, where aggression and offensive language were considered part of the rebellious appeal. Kurt Cobain, skinny kid from Aberdeen who'd been bullied himself, who'd seen his friends suffer, decided that rebellion should mean something different. It should mean standing up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. That night in Vancouver, 900 people saw what real courage looks like. It doesn't look like posturing or violence or aggressive displays of dominance. It looks like a quiet guy with a guitar, sitting down on stage and refusing to continue until justice was done. It looks like choosing principle over profit, morality over momentum. It looks like Kurt Cobain telling a drunk bully that hate has no home here, and meaning it with every fiber of his being.